This is episode 4 of the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. Today we talk about intuitive eating. You'll learn what intuitive eating is, why it's important, and how it helps you have peace with food. You'll also learn the 10 principles of intuitive eating so you can use them in your life. Lastly, as we do in every episode, we'll have a doable for you to take all of this learning and integrate it into your life. Let's start the show. Welcome to the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. I'm Kim McLaughlin and I am the host of this show. Today we are talking about some really great fundamentals when we're looking at binge eating and overeating and making peace with food. Intuitive eating is that key principle. There's a lot to learn about intuitive eating, and I hope through this podcast that you will come away with some basic understanding and possibly you'll want to learn more about it. I learned about intuitive eating years ago through the work of Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. They are the authors of the book Intuitive Eating, a revolutionary program that works. And I gotta say, when we talk about having peace with food, this book and this learning is really what helped me understand more how we can have peace with food. When I was starting my practice and deciding to work with people on eating disorders, overeating, binge eating, emotional eating, I knew I needed to have some basic foundation as I went into beginning the work. And I was led to Intuitive Eating, the book. Through reading that book, I learned so much about intuitive eating that I decided to take their training. And I took 40 hours worth of training. I became a certified intuitive eating counselor, and it has served me in more ways than I can tell you. Obviously, I can't go through the 40 hours of training plus all the years of learning I've had from my own personal experience and my clients in this podcast, but I'm going to give you some great ideas and help you understand better what intuitive eating could mean for you. I like intuitive eating because it has 10 principles, and we're going to go over those 10 principles, but first let's talk about what intuitive eating is and why it is important. I think intuitive eating is really the opportunity to have an idea of how to eat that is not connected to dieting, and really the opposite of the dieting mindset. What I see intuitive eating as is the ability to have peace with food and to understand what's going on physically with you about food, what's going on emotionally for you with food, and what the thoughts are connected with food, and putting them together. I just heard a podcast with Elise on it, and she said intuitive eating is the dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. So let's break that down. The dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. The instinct is really the focus on our body and noticing when we're hungry, when we're full, what is leading us to eat physically. The interplay with that, with the emotions, about how the emotions play out in our life and lead us to want to eat, and how do they affect our desire for food. And also add to that the thoughts that lead us to want to eat. And often we feel that they're out of control. So we have this interplay of instincts, which is that body focus, emotions, and thoughts. When we look at all of those together, it's not just a focus on that physical sensation of are we hungry or are we full and what should I eat, but it's really a dynamic focus. So that is really what intuitive eating is. And they have another definition that they define what healthy eating is. And they define healthy eating as having a healthy balance of food and having a healthy relationship with food. And I like that because once again, it's about the food, but it's not about the food. And it goes to that deeper understanding of what is leading us to eat and what's leading us to overeat, and how do we balance everything together so that we have that peace with food. What I like about Elise and Evelyn's view on intuitive eating is that they come from the world of being dietitians. How I hear the story from them is that they were dietitians giving people food plans. And what they found is that as they gave people food plans, the people would lose weight, which is what they wanted to do. And they found that year or so later, people would come back to them upset that they had gained weight back. But what happened was that the people that had gone on the diet, lost the weight, come back later, they blame themselves that they did something wrong. And what Evelyn and Elise said is that they were surprised that people weren't blaming them, that they had a bad food plan. And what they noticed was people who have issues with food, who binge eat, really blame themselves and really feel guilty about their overeating and think it's all their fault. Then Evelyn and Elise decided they would come up with a plan to address the larger issues. Remember, they said it's an interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. A larger plan that addressed all those areas so that food could be in balance with the rest of the person's life. I find that as I use intuitive eating, it has helped me move off of that dieting mindset, and it's helped me feel more in balance in my life. And I really want to introduce this concept to you. So let's get into it. There are 10 principles that they have, and we'll go over each of them to help you determine where you might be out of balance in the areas of intuitive eating. So Evelyn and Elise say the first principle is to reject the diet mentality. This is exactly in line with what we talked about in episode 3 of Ditch the Diet. And they have the same idea that I do, that I've shared on this podcast, that really the starting spot to having intuitive eating, to be intuitive as you eat, is to reject the diet mentality. What they say is that if you're having problems with food, one piece for you to do is to come back to whether you've actually rejected the diet mentality, and is your eating plan actually a diet? And if it's a diet, as we talked about in Ditch the Diet, it's where you feel restricted, where you feel you have to conform to somebody else's view of what you should and shouldn't eat. And focusing on how you reject that diet, or focusing on rejecting that diet mindset, is a key principle and starts out the whole cascade of the process of intuitive eating. So whenever you might be struggling, check back. And we had a great doable in episode 3 of writing down your history of diets, writing down your feeling about diets and how have diets helped you, but also how have diets failed you. That will help you get to the point of rejecting that diet mentality. The second principle that they have is to honor your hunger. I love that principle because when we come from that dieting mindset, the last thing we honor is our hunger. What we honor when we come from the dieting mindset is we honor what other people tell us to eat, what other people tell us we shouldn't eat, what time they tell us to eat, what time they tell us we shouldn't eat. And we're never looking into ourselves and what we physically feel and what our body really needs. So the second principle of honoring your hunger is the way to get back in touch with your body. You can do such things as notice, when do you feel hungry? When do you feel full? Where do you actually feel that hunger in your body? And what does that hunger lead you to do? Sometimes what we'll do is, if we have notice of that hunger, we don't eat because we say it's not the right time to eat. I shouldn't be hungry. I ate enough earlier. I've had enough calories today, I shouldn't eat. What I think of is our body is miraculous, and it knows when we need to eat. And if it is physical hunger, you need to eat. Honor your hunger. Principle number 3 is make peace with food. Making peace with food means we get to eat, that food is good, and that we need to eat in order to move our bodies, in order to give us fuel. We deserve to eat. What happens a lot is when we've been on diets, when we've had that dieting mindset, when we've been a part of that diet culture, we think food is the enemy, and it is what we have to fight against. Food is just food. It's nothing we have to fight against. It is something that we need in order to live. What happens with food is that it becomes the bad guy because we have that backlash against the diet. So remember, we talked about that in episode 3, that when you have that circle, at the top of the circle is dieting, which is restricting. And as we do that over time, diet, restrict, it moves into the second part of the circle, which we move into binging, which is that backlash from over dieting. As we diet, we then feel bad about ourselves, and we move over to the next part of the circle, which is guilt and shame. And we feel bad about ourselves. We feel that we're horrible people, that we've done something wrong, and that who we are is bad. The more we feel that, the more that leads us back again to the top of that circle to think, well, the only way to fix this is to diet. Making peace with food means we get to eat, and eating is not bad. As we move into principle 4, it really goes together with making peace with food. And number 4 principle is challenge the food police. The food police are the thoughts that tell us what is good food and what is bad food, what we should have and what we shouldn't have, what's on the diet, what's not on the diet. I really encourage you to look at that part of you that thinks food is all good or all bad. Generally, we find that the good food is the veggies with no oil, and salad, and what else? Lean meats would probably be some of the things that would be probably on your list of good foods, or beans. Those kind of things would be on good foods. Bad food would be anything that has any kind of fat in it, has any kind of sugar, might have carbohydrates in it, might be in a box. And what we do is when we eat the bad foods, I'm going to say quote unquote bad foods, I say that a lot, quote unquote bad foods, we then want to diet and restrict because we shouldn't have been bad. And actually what we say is if we eat bad foods, we are actually bad. And we think of ourselves as being bad internally because we ate this food. Remember when we talked about principle number 3, make peace with food. There is no bad food. It's just food. And is it food that gives you energy and nutrition to do the things you want to do, or doesn't it? And is it food that is something that you enjoy? Do it. And challenge the food police that tells you that you're bad for eating this certain food. You're not bad for eating food. You're not. Moving on to principle 5 is feel your fullness. I love this one because this is the part about feeling you're in your body. And remember, we talked at number 2, principle number 2 is honor your hunger. Well, feel your fullness, this principle number 5 goes together with that because we want to honor our hunger, but then feel our fullness. And that does not become permission to overeat. That's a lot of what we find people talk about when they think about intuitive eating. One of the areas that people get wrong is they think that intuitive eating means you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want, as much as you want, till overfull, till you're stuffed, and you can't get up off the couch. And that's not true. That's not true at all. It's really a dynamic understanding of how food is integrated into our lives and related to our lives, and really getting back to that really basic understanding about what food is about for us. This principle number 5, feel your fullness, means that we're present in our body and present for that feeling of fullness, gentle fullness, not over fullness. So we're feeling that satiated point and going, oh, I'm in my body, I'm feeling satiated, I feel good, I've had enough food. And you stop. And I know that's easier to say than it is to do. I totally get it. But we have to start honoring or paying attention to our body and how does it feel in terms of fullness. And is our body reflecting that gentle fullness, that satiated point? And if we can't stop at that point, then there's a whole nother question about what's going on emotionally for you that you can't stop when you're feeling full and satiated. It could also be that you don't stop when you're full and satiated because you've been a little too connected to the diet mentality, and maybe you're eating foods that you think you shouldn't eat. And if we eat foods we think we shouldn't eat, we can often eat them to overfull because we feel guilty and we think we'll never have them again. If you think you'll never have a certain food again, you're going to overeat it, and you're going to eat till past full. And you won't be able to engage in this principle number 5 of feeling your fullness. Principle number 6 is discover the satisfaction factor. Discovering satisfaction is super important because when we come from that diet mentality, we often don't eat what satisfies us. We eat because we're overwhelmed. We eat because we're feeling uncomfortable. We eat because we think we're supposed to. We eat because the diet tells us what we're supposed to eat. When we are in that satisfaction factor, we're thinking about what would satisfy me right now. What am I hungry for? What is my body telling me to eat? This is where people have a struggle with intuitive eating because they've been told so often by that diet mentality, by the diet culture, that they can't eat certain foods. And what I think of when I think of diet food, I often think of it's food that doesn't taste good. And I remember whenever I would be on a diet, I would eat foods that were horrible. I was just describing to one of my clients yesterday that I went on this diet before I got married, and I ate this boxed food that you added water to. It was horrible, and I ate it. I have horrible memories of it, and I realized once I started intuitive eating, I will never eat food that tastes horrible again. I value myself. I value my body. I value me and my soul. And I'm going to eat foods that satisfy me. I know that can be a radical shift, but just kind of lean into what that might mean to you to start eating foods that satisfy you. Principle number 7 is cope with your emotions without using food. Well, that's a lot to do. We'll have many podcasts on that about how do we manage emotions without using food. When we binge eat, we use food to manage emotions. We use food to manage our lives. And it takes a lot of pulling it all apart to get to the point where we don't eat over emotions. Or if we're thinking about overeating, we can then notice what emotions are going on. The good thing about when we're feeling called to overeat is it can be a wonderful opportunity to step back and go, how am I feeling right now? And how am I not taking care of those feelings in a really productive way? Food does not manage emotions. We think it does. It might do it for a second or two, maybe a minute or two, but there becomes that end point where food does not manage emotions. And what we want to do is to be able to manage emotions, cope with emotions without using food. And I know that can be hard, but it's doable. It's very doable. Start considering, when do you use food to cover up emotions? What are those emotions and what could you do instead? The 8th principle is respect your body. This is something we often don't do when we're overeaters and bingers because we often hate our bodies. I hear people all the time telling me that they hate their body. They hate how they look. They're trying to hide their arms. They're trying to hide their hips, trying to hide their legs, wear baggy clothes. They wear black clothes. Anything that is large and covers ourselves up because we don't feel good about our body. Respecting our body means we treat it with dignity and we love on our body. We give our body nourishing food, but we also say nice things about our body. We can tend to put ourselves down and say how fat we are, how ugly we are, how we're not the right weight, how we are not thinking we're good people because of our body. Respecting our body means that we come back to a place of self-love for our bodies. That can move into loving our bodies, like using really lovely lotions, getting a pedicure so we can feel our feet, taking a deep breath so that we feel real centered in our body, wearing clothes that fit, wearing clothes that we feel beautiful in, wearing clothes that just make us look beautiful and feel beautiful. What I know when we're in that diet mentality, when we're into feeling negative about ourselves from all of our overeating, one of the first things we do is be angry or feel angry towards our body. And this principle of respecting our body is important to begin to do in order to move into that place of intuitive eating. Principle number 9 is exercise and feel the difference. I think this is important and scary for people. I know this is important. I know this is scary. And I love that it's principle number 9 because I find it's one of the last things my clients are willing to look at is how to exercise. I love to call it movement because exercise for me has often had a really negative connotation of being sweaty, hurting, doing, do it till you feel pain, and doing things that are well outside of my physical comfort zone. And when we start exercising, that means we're moving more into our body. What I find is when people are first coming to see me, we can talk, they're more willing to talk about food and emotions and thoughts and diet culture, and not willing to do any exercise because what's happened is exercise has got connected to dieting. When we diet, we exercise. When we stop dieting, we stop exercising because they're totally connected. I want you to consider separating exercise or movement away from dieting. And since we are physical human beings, we need to move our bodies. It's really important to feel connected to our bodies, and we have movement just for movement's sake, not to lose weight. I'm going to say that again. We have movement just for movement's sake, not as a way to lose weight. Principle number 10 is honor your health with gentle nutrition. Really looking at how you eat, what you eat, and is it nutritious? Does it feed your body in the way your body needs to be fed? There is, what foods work for you and what foods don't. And when we have that diet mindset, we move away from that and we actually resist foods that really feel good in our body because it feels so connected to dieting. What I think of when I think of honoring our health with gentle nutrition is it's a nice, sweet way to move into what food feels good in my body, what food gives me energy. And those are foods that I want to eat more of. This is also incorporates all of the other principles because as we're having gentle nutrition, we're letting go of the food police. We're making peace with food. We're honoring our hunger. We're eating satisfying foods. And we're respecting our body because we're eating foods that feel good inside of us. Those are the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And I encourage you to review them and to incorporate them as much as you can into your life. It takes time to incorporate them. We have been bombarded by the diet culture with eating only for diet's sake, eating only to lose weight. And intuitive eating offers us a whole different way to eat and to live our lives. As always, at the end of every podcast, I have a doable for you. And that's something that you can do during the week in order to increase your peace with food and to feed your soul. This week, I'm going to give you a doable that actually I give clients when they come into my office, especially when they're newer clients. And this is the idea of increasing self-care. What I find when people have issues with food is we don't take very good care of ourselves. And when I ask people what they do to take care of themselves, they look at me sideways and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't do that. I want you to think about what is one self-care technique you could do this week that would help you feel better about yourself. It could be one self-care technique is you eat satisfying foods. You practice a little bit more movement. Move in a way that feels good for you. You might go get a pedicure. You might take a nap. You might listen to music. You might put nice lotion on your legs. Think of something you can do that is self-care and do that. I would really love for you to do that and put it in the comment section. Let me know what self-care techniques you've used this last week, because what I know is that we are stronger together, and the more ideas we have, we can learn from each other and integrate self-care techniques that each other is doing. I love hearing people's self-care techniques because it reminds me of things that I need to do. And I'll go in the show notes myself and I'll write down one self-care technique I'm going to do this next week. And I will role model what I'm talking about in the comment section. I really appreciate you all being present for this intuitive eating talk. It is a core fundamental to what I do and how I see we can all have peace with food. I look forward to talking to you the next podcast. This is Kim McLaughlin. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for joining us on the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. We come to you every Monday with fresh new ideas to help you end emotional eating and put food in its proper place as nourishment. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and review it and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us.